We continue to follow the latest developments in the crisis in Ukraine. As we've been reporting, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree Monday recognizing Crimea as a sovereign and independent state. France is postponing Tuesday's planned visit to Moscow by its defense and foreign ministers in the wake of the crisis in Crimea, which voted overwhelmingly Sunday to join Russia. The move comes as the United States and the European Union impose financial and travel sanctions on Russian and Ukrainian officials connected to the referendum in Crimea. CCTV's Nathan King joins us now with more on that part of the story. Nathan.
Thanks, Mike. When the U.S. officials announced that the sanctions are going to be imposed on Russia, they said they would hit close to home. And by home, they mean the Kremlin. But will that change Kremlin policy over Crimea?
24 hours after the celebrations on the streets of Crimea, the consequences.
We're making it clear that there are consequences for their actions.
U.S. sanctions, including asset freezes and travel bans, are on 7 Russian leaders, including 2 aides to Vladimir Putin, 3 Ukrainian separatist leaders, and the deposed president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. Other areas targeted are the Russian arms sector, and additional sanctions are being considered. U.S. President Obama is to travel to Europe next week. European sanctions also include asset freezes and travel bans. 21 individuals are targeted, including 8 Crimean politicians, 10 Russians, including members of the Duma, the Federal Council, and 3 Russian military commanders. Further economic sanctions are also being considered. But are they enough to change Russian policy?
It won't matter in terms of how events evolve in Crimea, I don't think. I think the Russians have factored this into their equation. It will hurt, but it won't stop them. But I think what will be the next big question mark is if indeed the Russians escalate. President Obama has more sanctions in his back pocket as well.
By targeting the individuals, some of which are pictured here, the US and the EU are avoiding targeting the Russian economy as a whole, and for now sparing economic pain, especially for Europe, which has a more than $400 billion a year trading relationship with Moscow. But EU ministers will meet later this week to consider financial sanctions. Further moves by Moscow towards formally incorporating Crimea into the Russian Federation could cost more. But Russia has threatened to retaliate.
The Russians have already said that they will respond very strongly to any sort of sanctions that are imposed on its citizens. They have threatened, at least, to confiscate the property of Western companies. I don't think that they're necessarily going to follow through on those either. Russia still wants to try to attract Western investment.
And Europe needs Russia's natural resources and may balk at more sanctions that could undo decades of closer ties. The question is, can there be a diplomatic solution to de-escalate tensions and move to solve the crisis over Crimea?
U.S. officials also playing down fears that Moscow could stop cooperating over international efforts to restrict Iran's controversial nuclear program or on the removal of Syria's chemical weapons. But what is clear is that relations between Washington and Moscow are at one of their lowest ebbs since the end of the Cold War, and the crisis over Crimea is far from over. And if the crisis spreads to the rest of Ukraine, Mike, escalation, of course, a real possibility.
And we heard from our guests earlier that there's this tug of war between the West and Russia, and that perhaps some of these other former Soviet states might also be in the mix. What's the U.S. trying to do to reassure them?
Yeah, well, France may not be going to Moscow, as you mentioned, but the U.S. is going to Poland. Vice President Joe Biden from here is going to Poland to reassure a NATO ally, a former Soviet state, and also speak to officials from Estonia who will be there, and then on to Lithuania. The Latvians will be there as well. They've already sent in extra jets, F-15s and the like, but they are stressing there's only a diplomatic way out of this, not a military one.
All right, Nathan King, as always, thanks so much.